Welcome back to another week here on Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. That's Clarkey. I'm Drury, and we're very pleased to be joined by another great special guest this week on our show, brought to you as always by CoolBet and in part by the Listowel Squash Courts and See the Game. We'll talk to somebody from See the Game later, but first, we are very pleased to be joined by Toronto Mike of TorontoMike.com, the Toronto Mic'd podcast, and Hebsy on Sports, among many other things. It's Toronto Mike. How you doing, brother?
Good. How you guys doing?
We're doing very well. We're excited to have you on the show. There's a lot to dig into in terms of the media landscape in Toronto, the sports scene, of course. Let's start overall just with the media landscape. I mean, there's been a lot of crazy shuffling around in the media landscape within the city and the sports media landscape, of course. You're as tapped into that as anybody. You've got a great website. You cover all different aspects of the city and what's going on. Just your general impression of what the industry looks like right now. It's a little bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah, I guess the word of the day would be convergence. Is that a word? I got to Google that one.
Yep, that's a word. It's a good one.
Like the big news, and it's not sports media, but the big news in the Toronto media landscape this week is Pooja Handa and Gurdeep Ahluwalia. No surprise. I called this shot quite a long time ago, but they're the new CHFI morning show. And then you look at these guys, and these are very attractive TV stars, and you're like, what are they doing on the radio? So if I were Sid Sixero in the breakfast television crew, I'd be watching my back.
Let's talk a little bit about the sports landscape. Right. I want to ask you first off, do you have a go-to? Because this is a totally different landscape, especially with podcasts the way they are right now. But if you had a go-to, what would it be? TSN 1050 or the Fan 590?
I got to admit, I'm a little bit of a creature of habit. I normally find myself on the Fan 590. But I have to confess, though, my friend, the number of hours I spend on terrestrial radio, if it's not CBC Radio 1, I practically don't touch it anymore. It's unless I'm stuck in the car for some reason and my Bluetooth isn't working because my phone is dying or something. I mean, who's out there? I'm curious, like, who is listening to terrestrial radio these days?
That's a great question. Obviously, you're referring to the people, stuck on the Gardiner, stuck on the 401 heading home. But I think that's all changed. It's definitely all changed. And like Ryan and I, we have a different habit we're out in Listowel, Ontario, which is about 45 minutes northeast or northwest of Kitchener. That's where we are. And the signal's not great out here. So our listening habits now for terrestrial radio is podcasting. We will listen to the podcast. Like I always like to listen to the first hour of First Up with Carlo and Aaron Krolnick.
Sure.
So it's different. And, when the Fan 590 came out recently saying, we're going to make it different, we're going to podcast instead of do radio shows. I think you need a good radio show and good talent to do podcast. Right.
Okay. So yeah, I always wonder, like, who is it that, wants to tune in for the recording of the podcast? Like the whole joy of a podcast is that it's on demand, right? Like to me, what I like is I can literally, like, with the podcasting app of choice, I like Podcast Addict. I cherry pick the episodes of the shows I subscribe to, and they get stitched together, if you will. And then when I'm ready, which is typically a bike ride, I start going, and that's my media of choice. And who are these people who want to listen in real, like they want to be there at 10 a.m. for this recording of the podcast? Like,
yeah, it makes no sense to me either.
And you mentioned something, Clarkey, there. Like you're talking about, like, the people stuck on the Gardiner. Like, of course, a traffic jam is terrestrial radio's best friend, but it's no longer just the guys and gals stuck in traffic. It's those people who haven't figured out the Bluetooth yet. Like. And that percentage, it's like, first of all, how many people have cars without Bluetooth now? And how many people haven't figured out that they can press a button on their smartphone and have it come through their car speakers? Like, I worry, not too much. Like, I don't, I get my sleep at night. Don't worry about it. But like, who is terrestrial radio for?
I don't know. I think it's for breaking news. And that is the only time I would probably grab the radio and want to tune in live, is on breaking news. Leafs make a trade, Jays make a trade, or whatever. That's the only advantage I see them having. I mean, I know Hebsy does his live on Friday mornings, but for the most part, podcasts are recorded. and you can listen to it on demand later. So to me, breaking news is the only way to go. Only reason I would listen to live radio nowadays. That's the only reason.
It's a good point. And Hebsy does, yeah. On Friday mornings, you can watch us record. Yep. So I just laughed at people watching the recording of a podcast. And you can watch us, but I mean, I see the numbers. The overwhelming majority of Hebsy on Sports consumers listen to the podcast.
Sure. So, how'd you hook up with Hebsy?
I invited him on my podcast many moons ago. So Toronto Mike is now like in its 10th year. I guess we turned 10 in August 2022.
And how many podcasts have you done?
Today I dropped 959. So
that's crazy. Who's going to be on 1,000? Have you figured that out yet?
I don't know. It might be a Rod Black, Leo Rowden's reunion.
Ooh. Nice. I've heard you talking about that. Yeah.
Like in person though.
Yeah.
And that might be 1,000. I got a few ideas. And I might just do something really punk and just do like a normal episode of some random dude. Like I haven't decided yet what 1,000 will be, but.
And how long have you been doing this?
Okay, so August 2012 was episode 1. And so we're 9+ years now.
And what made you start to do it?
Hebsy. Yeah, okay, so I'll wrap up that. I'll put a bow on the Hebsy thing, except that basically I invited, and I still do, but I invite people I'm interested in talking to. I invite them on the show. And I am of an age where Sportsline was everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, guy. So, sorry. Now I got to write a check to Jim Taddy every time I say that.
Yeah. He's listening.
Now you're gonna get Jim and Hebsy together. I know you. I've heard you talking about it.
I've tried quite.
I know.
I've done my best. I give up. When somebody doesn't want to do it,
I know.
Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
That's Jim's.
So get McCowan and Hebsher on together. That'd be a good one.
Well, McCowan, famously in my circle, it's like, famously, I think he confused me with another Mike. Like I invited him to be the guest for episode 500.
Yeah.
He tweeted, like a public tweet, not a DM or anything, like a public tweet. Oh, Toronto Mike wants me to be guest for number 500, but from what I understand, he doesn't care for me and his followers don't like me, so I'm going to pass or something like that. And I don't know where that came from. I've never said, like, I've always been a Bobcat fan. I mean, until then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to
for 8 years. I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. We're going to have to set the record straight with Bob because we had him on our old show and he gave us almost 2 hours of his time. So, I mean,
he won't give me 2 minutes. Toronto Mike can't get a minute with Bob.
Well, I think we can help smooth the relationship over, Clarkey?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I'm curious about your impression overall of just the sports landscape that the media covers right now in Toronto. It's overtly positive right now overall, I would say, as we record this, because the Maple Leafs are on a heater as we record. Their first overall. They're winning tons of games. The Blue Jays are splashing money around. They've got lots of exciting young stars. The Argos are the Argos. And TFC is terrible. And the Raptors are, on the up and up. I mean, they're improving. What's your overall impression of the sports scene in the city and where could it improve, do you think?
Yeah, you mean are you talking about the coverage of the sports teams or what I miss? And I know you're talking to Rob Longley and you got to talk to him about this, but the coverage of the coverage.
Yeah. I mean,
so the coverage of the coverage is sorely lacking. Like it's completely disappeared. When I was growing up, Longley did it, but I mean, Dave Schultz for a while was doing it, but Chris Zelkovich was doing it. And there were these different like media critics, and they would sort of critique, they would comment on the sports media landscape in this market. And I loved that. Like I loved it. And now I'll be, who's doing it now? Like I do a little of it. There's like
I don't know. Is anyone doing it?
No, not for the mainstream media.
No.
Like Schultz was the last guy I think had it as a fairly regular beat, and he covered that Rogers hockey deal for the NHL, and then he wrote a book about it, and then he jumped at the chance to take a package and get out of the Globe and Mail. So I mean, I don't think anyone does it now.
I guess online is Jonah Siegel.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, I've lost touch. Like he had a website, and then he sold it to sports betting something or other, and then I don't even know if it exists anymore.
I don't know. I don't know.
Sure either.
But no,
I think it's gone. Yeah. I think it's gone. He's on Twitter or whatever, but I think the blog is gone. But even that's just a guy living in Seattle. Yeah. I'm just a guy doing my best because I'm a curious cat, but there's no mainstream media coverage of our sports media landscape.
Do you think it would be a cool thing, and can it be done? And I'll give you an idea, because I've had this idea for a while, Mike, but I'll pass it on to you. Okay. You could have a terrific Toronto podcasting network if you got some guys like Mark Hebsy, Bob McCann, like they all do podcasts, and put them on like a Toronto sports media website, and just have all those guys that people used to listen to all the time. Like, I know Brunt's still involved, but there's got to be guys. Damien, you had Damien on your show not long ago. You put Gordon, Damien back together, like that kind of thing. I think it would be cool to amalgamate all those people and have like a Toronto sports media podcasting network.
Well, I like totally love it. Like, and I'm practically trying to do that. But like when I have chats with, people like, let's say Dave Hodge. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to him just, hey, let's get the reporters back together for a podcast, like, which I would dig. And I said, like, let's do this. It always comes down to money. Like who's going to pay for this? And then, of course, beyond the production costs, all the people involved with like a little piece of the action. And then it always, not always, but sometimes it dies on the vine because it's like, hey, we need a big name sponsor to cut a big check before we record episode 1.
Yeah. How did the guys in Vancouver? They've successfully done it, haven't they? The guys who got let go from, I guess it was Fan in Vancouver, was it?
Well,
it was TSN Radio in Vancouver.
They must have found the money. Like,
they went after their sponsors who sponsored their radio show. And they're, from what I hear, doing really well. But yeah.
Now, I'm involved with a few podcasts that do make quite a bit of money right now. And I can tell you these podcasts, and including my own, started making no money. Like, I'm thinking now of like Humble and Fred, who have just celebrated 10 years of podcasting. It makes a good chunk of change. The beginning, we started doing that 4 days a week with no sponsors paying actual money.
Right.
And we did that, and we kind of put in the reps and worked at it, and then the money came. Like, I feel like this whole idea in the podcasting world, like I'll record episode 1 after the check is cut. Right. That might work for some big name people, but typically you got to produce a good piece of content that people want to hear.
Yeah.
And then you'll figure out how to monetize that.
Just like any sponsor, want to see the numbers, wants to see the audience, how many people are watching it or listening to it. Right.
So do it as a labor of love first, and then when it's a good product people like, and then you can make money there.
That's what we did here, and now Cool Bet's on board.
Good for 100.
100%. We established a good relationship with our friends at Cool Bet with our old show. When we started this show, they wanted to stay on board. They believe in the product, and that's great. And but that was after, Clarkey, what did we do our old show for 4.5 years?
Yep.
With no
nothing,
sponsor,
not a cent,
zero sponsor.
Just our love.
You're singing my song, man. These guys called me up. And we worked out a deal, and that might have been something like 6 years ago. But yeah, there was absolutely at least 100 episodes in the can before I made $1 on Toronto.
So speaking of the can, what is the can? Give them a plug. What is it?
Yes, Great Lakes Brewery. Sure, I didn't know if you guys wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
So Great Lakes were the first sponsor, and they're still on board. I literally talked to them today, and they're fantastic. And it's delicious, fresh craft beer from a fiercely independent local craft brewery.
And I love the fact that, like, we used to do it on the Fan. I know back in the day, we used to have parting gifts for all the fans. I love the lasagna. Is it lasagnas you give people?
Well, you want to know the full list? It's kind of amazing right now.
Go.
So when Damien Cox was here, as you mentioned, he left with a large meat lasagna from Palma Pasta. Moneris has these wireless speakers. So he got a wireless speaker to listen to the new Moneris podcast. He got a case of fresh craft beer from Great Lakes. He got a $75 digital gift card to spend at Chef Drop, chefdrop.ca. And he got the best of all, of course, the Toronto Mike sticker from Sticker U. So
nice. That's great. That's great.
I love it. My next question is, how do I get on this podcast? Because you said lasagna and my eyes lit up. That's fantastic. And it's a small world too. Great Lakes Brewery, they actually sponsor a podcast of a buddy of mine. So that's fun.
What's the name of that podcast?
It is called The Walk Show. It's by a guy named Derek Prince Cox. He was in a semi-famous metal band from the Guelph area. He actually used to manage our band back in the day.
Wow.
And now he hosts a show, and it's very Guelph and area centric. He's big on pushing the local music scene. And yeah, they recently jumped on and are sponsoring his show.
So my son lives in Waterloo right now. Is that your area? Is that close enough? I feel like that's close enough.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Very close. Yeah.
Whose dog is that?
That's my. It's
100%
mine.
Clarkey.
There's two of them. It'll
He
get a
has a
little
zoo.
louder, but that's okay. That's what podcasts are all about, right? Bringing people into your lives.
It's the ambiance. And I like the fact that a podcast is not polished like the old school radio. I like the fact that you can have a dog in the background. And
Yes.
I have a cat too that usually makes an appearance, but with the dogs around, I don't know if she will tonight. But anyway, it's all good.
I wonder as well, Mike, and we really appreciate you doing this. I mean, like you mentioned, you're a busy guy, you're involved with so many things, and everybody should check out your website. It's really awesome, torontomike.com. I'm curious, I mean, obviously big news this week that, you know, Brian Williams is retiring after a very, very long and distinguished career. 50
I thought he already did, but
well, I mean, but I mean, he's an icon. And I mean, I don't know that I can look out right now and necessarily see people that are going to retire from the industry in a few more years and necessarily be on that type of level anymore because the industry's changed too much.
so, Brian, the one thing I will say that's kind of neat about having like almost 1,000 episodes under your belt is that you've had a lot of cool people visit you, like visit your home. This is my home studio. And Brian's one of them. So the story goes, I invited Brian on because I still am, but a huge Olympics fan. Like, loved it. The first Olympics I watched were the 84 Olympics in LA. Too young to realize that a bunch of the world didn't show up for that one. But Brian Williams was the host. And, you know, all the time in LA time, and he do his time checks and everything. And I freaking, that was it. Like, I was hooked. I loved the Olympics. I loved Brian Williams. And I invited him on. And he reached out to his close friend, Dave Hodge, who he saw on my list of guests. And he said, his buddy Dave, like, this Toronto Mike has invited me to his basement. Like, should I visit this guy? And then Dave told him, do it and thank me later. And Brian came over and we talked for 90 minutes. And I'll just say, Brian, one of the great sweethearts in our business, because our business, see that? I snuck myself in there. It's my business.
Yeah, no, it's
I produced the Grape Line with Brian and Don Cherry for a couple of years.
Wow.
When I was at the Fan, or Telemedia was.
Well, I can almost
Pryor
hear,
Smith was like the producer. I was the editor. I would record it.
In my mind, I can hear like Don Landry doing an impression of. Those two doing Grape Line.
Yeah, there's another guy we can get on our podcasting network.
Yeah, we haven't checked in with Don in a while.
Yeah, we've had him on
because the CFL is.
Yeah, he used
to.
Crunch
time.
I saw him maybe 6 months ago. He lived in Stratford, and I was going for my shot, my vaccine, and I had my dog with me. So I asked him if he could come over to the rink and watch my dog for 15 minutes. So he did, and we had a little chit chat. But I think he's moved up north now. So I think he's...
when Brian Williams was coming over, I actually reached out to Don Landry and said, "Can you record a like imitation?" Because he does that great imitation, and I played that off the top of the episode. So, but
nice.
just to say farewell. And again, this is interesting because a lot of these guys, like be it like a Rod Black or a Michael Landsberg, they're retired.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Air quotes here. So those two gentlemen were retired from Bell Media. I will give Brian the benefit of the doubt that he decided it was time, but in this day and age, really only he and his God knows whether he got the tap on the shoulder and was told it was time, because that's one of the things you learn from having so many of these media veterans on is that you think somebody retired and they said, okay, I'm done, but they were tapped on the shoulder and said, you're done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know recently you wondered that about Jim Hewson.
I think he did retire. I think he got tired of the grind and they weren't going to give him the sweet life he was used to of the good hotels and the good. I think he said, that's it. I'm done.
That's fine. I'm totally fine with that one. I wasn't a fan. Chris Cuthbert's just so good. That's why. Chris is so good.
CC's
and
fantastic.
It's so nice watching the Leaf game with Chris Cuthbert on there and Gordon Miller. Hey, I wanted to talk Mike, about your episode that I listened to just the other day about the Team 1050 and their demise. And some of the guys you had on there who I know very well, Mike Richards being one of them, but Scott Ferguson, how was that? Because Fergie and I go way back when he, hosted Baseball Today. He was one of my heroes growing up watching, because I was in a baseball rotisserie league, and there was nothing better after a ball game than to tune on. And there was no other way to find out. There was no phones back then that you could find out the information on. But how was it talking to Fergie? And how's he doing? Do you know?
Well, like yourself, those the out of town scoreboard and the this is the pre-Wilner era for the kids out there. But Wilner only got that gig because Scott Ferguson left the fan for the Team 1050.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott Ferguson's voice was part of my summers along with Tom and Jerry, and it was kind of surreal and a bit bittersweet. Like, I enjoyed chatting with him very much, but sometimes it's a little like there's a tinge of sadness in how it all ends up for these guys. And I think he disclosed a health concern he was struggling with, and so I loved the chat and reminiscing. I hope he's doing well. It's one of those tough things about getting older, I guess.
And last week on this show, we had Storm and Norman on, and he's an old friend of mine, and he was talking about his struggles after he got let go from the fan, and he was really down in the dumps, and he's recovered and a security guard now somewhere. But it's really tough for some of these guys, isn't it, to recover after losing a job that you've had for so long. I can thank my lucky stars. I walked away, 1 year ago, actually, from the media business, and I walked away on my own terms because I saw where it was going, and I'm happy where I am now. But it's tough on a lot of people.
Hammerhead alert. Hammerhead alert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hammer lick. We talked about all that.
Hammer lick.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Detroit the Murder City Dead Things, I think is what he was calling the Detroit. Yep. Norm's a good example of that tough call you have to make at some point, that you're leaving your media, like you're leaving the industry to pay the rent and to feed yourself. And Norm Rumack, along with like people like Howard Berger and Scott Ferguson, they come to this conclusion that they got to change their line of work. And I'm glad that Norm found that. He actually did an episode with me about, this is a thing that a lot of guys in their 50s and early 60s or even late 40s, they find themselves out of work, the only job they knew maybe, and suddenly they're out because maybe they were making too much money or they were downsized or whatever. So now they're out of work. Like, what's next if you don't have, a certain skill set? Like, what's next? And the fact that you can, find a new career and be it like logistics or security or whatever, it gives you kind of some hope for the future.
And speaking of Howard Berger, your little sign beside your behind your left shoulder there reminded me of Howard, because he's now at a funeral home.
That's right.
A funeral director assistant, I think.
Yeah, good for Berger to find another vocation, and shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, proud sponsors of Toronto Mike.
There you go.
Absolutely. Mike, I know we're almost out of time with you. You brought up the Olympics and your love of the Olympics. You fell in love with them in '84, and obviously kind of mentioned that a lot of people didn't go. That's kind of a point of contention with the upcoming Winter Olympics, of course, in Beijing, in a country that is obviously under the spotlight right now in sports media. They had the whole thing with the NBA. There's the ongoing concern with the tennis player Peng Shuai, of course. The WTA just announced the other day they are suspending every single tournament to be held in China and Hong Kong over that. There's concern right now, for different reasons, of course, that the NHL players might not go. It's still up in the air. Do you think they should go?
This is a tough one, man. This is quite the debate, because these athletes, right? These human beings, what's your window when you're at the top of your sport? Like, how small is that window? Like, my heart aches for anybody who, let's say you were, what was it, the Moscow Olympics in 1980? Is that right? That's right. The 80 Moscow Olympics is what we boycotted, as I recall.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Anyway, I just imagine being an elite athlete who you spend your whole life training, and then you have this like window of like 5 years where you're at the top of your game, and you find out you're not able to participate. Like, that's where my heart aches. Like, I hope these athletes get to compete in the Olympics next year. So it's a tough one. Like, that's one of the great sports podcast and sports broadcasting debates to be had, for sure.
Before we let you go,
is.
what was your favorite podcast you've done so far? Do you have one that really stands out?
That's a very good. I have a few. There's so many like great ones I would say that I just loved. Like there's some that I look back on and say that's the real talk I'm looking for, and one of them might be Anne Ruskowski of all people. So it's not sports media related because I try to do more than just the sports media guests. But
she was on City News back in the day, right?
very long time alongside Gord Martineau on City Pulse and City TV there, and then they let her go, and then she went to Global News and did some stuff there, and then. But what I loved about her appearance is she like just pulled no punches and shot from the hip and told it like it was, like warts and all, about what it was like, what it was like working with Gord Martineau. It was just so refreshing to spend 90 minutes with somebody without any BS at all. And I look back at that episode as one of my favorites. But there's a whole bunch. I mean, like I'm thinking of Tom Wilson from Junk House, who was just amazing, or Stephen Brunt was great and came back to kick out the jams, and Ron McLean was great, and just a lot of these guys are sweethearts. So
yeah,
Rod Black, by the way, Canada's sweetheart as far as I'm concerned, because hilarious, great guy, takes my call. The day he announced he was leaving TSN, he took my damn call, let me record it, let me put it in the Toronto Mike feed. Like, he's always there. He's been on my show I think 4 or 5 times in 2021 alone, and just love that guy.
Yeah, he's been on our show.
He is a beauty.
Sure.
And I will say he is always available. He did one appearance with us with his kids in the car when he was parked somewhere at one of their games.
And then remember last time he was on was right after his kid was drafted, and he couldn't figure out how to set his phone while he was sitting down. So he goes, I'm just going to stand. So we stood for half an hour and did the show.
It was ridiculous.
The kind of guy Rod Black
He's such a good guy. Yeah.
He's fantastic, dude. And so are you, Mike. We really appreciate you doing this, man. Toronto Mike, visit torontomike.com. Listen to the Toronto Mike podcast. Hebsy on Sports, like Mike said, they go live on Fridays at 10, but the podcast's available wherever you get them. 9:20. 9:20.
But you get a little extra too if you watch it, right? You get a little extra.
There's a red carpet show. We usually start 10 minutes early. Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely. Toronto Mike, man, we really appreciate you doing this. Thanks so much, eh?
It was fun. Peace and love to you both.
Welcome back to Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. That's Clarkey. I'm Drury. We're very pleased to be joined by another great special guest on the show this week. One of our favorites, our friend from the Sun. It's Rob Longley, the beat reporter for the Blue Jays at the Sun. Rob, how you doing, my friend?
Good. I guess I'm going to be off for the next 5 months, right?
Well, yeah. What do you think? Lockout happened. What do you think? What's your prediction?
Yay.
Well, I've said this to a number of people already, that my prediction is I think there will be a season, and I think the season probably will start on time. But I don't think we can pay attention to any of the negotiations at all until February 1st at the earliest, and maybe as late as February 14th, which is the day that pitchers and catchers were supposed to show up. And I'm sure there'll be meetings between now and then, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of rhetoric from both sides, and there'll be a lot of bitterness. But you would hope that in the interim, between now and sometime in February, that they narrow enough ground that they can really get down to the table in those 2 or 3 weeks and salvage the season. Because, I mean, man, oh man, you hope that both sides realize that there's way too much at stake here to allow a real work stoppage. It's not really a work stoppage now. I mean, guys can't go to their minor league facilities and you can't negotiate it, but it's winter time. It's the off season. There's no winter meetings, big deal. But they can't allow a work stoppage that carries into April. I mean, of all the sports, I think baseball can afford it the least.
So besides money, which is mostly what it always comes down to, what are the two sides looking for, do you think, in respect to the game, like expanded playoffs, a shorter season,
universal
kind of
DH,
universal DH, robot umpires?
I think a lot of those things, those are sort of the minor throw-ins at some point. The big deal, the big part of the deal to be hammered out is how the economics of baseball proceed going forward. So then, once you make some traction in that area, then it's okay. We want expanded one side says we want expanded playoffs. Okay, you can have that. Okay, the other side says we want universal DH. You can have that. But the crux of the matter is how they revise the economic system of baseball, which in a lot of ways the players, in a lot of ways the entire PA think is outdated right now. And I think that it requires enough of an overhaul that it's going to be difficult to make up that ground.
Rob, financially, between the two sides, who are obviously going to come, at different edges of this argument, what do you think is the main sticking point financially from the player's perspective and from the owner's perspective? I would guess the player's perspective would be the way free agency is handled.
Yeah, I think that's really the nut of it. I mean, players always want to get paid, and as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, they are getting paid. But
some
are exactly. It's a big enough union that the upper class of the union wants to fight for the middle and especially the lower class, not only to get paid, but to be able to get paid what they're due earlier. I mean,
right.
Guys having to wait 5 and 6 years to get their money. Guys like Vlad Guerrero Jr. of the Blue Jays, who was second in the American League MVP voting, playing for $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 for the next 2 years. I mean, it seems ludicrous in a lot of levels. Now, I don't know how you strip apart that entire system or blow up that entire system to keep the ownership happy, and I have no idea where the middle ground would be on that, or if there even is one. I mean, obviously the money's there, but the union clearly wants to spread out that wealth a little better than it's being done right now. A lot better.
And from the player's perspective, it's odd too, because I mean, I jokingly but semi-seriously said, some players are getting money, billions and billions getting thrown around over the last week or so. And we'll dig into some of those deals in a minute, but it's almost, biting your nose to spite your face in a way where, Corey Seager's getting $325 million from the Texas Rangers, but the middle class players and lower end guys as well are the ones that, and certainly some veteran players are the ones that get cut out at the knees a little bit here, where the owners go, okay, well, we gave $325 million to Corey Seager, and well, now we don't have money left over for, reliever X, Y, and Z, which I think we all know just isn't true. There are owners out there that are, that have $40 million payrolls that could absolutely and exponentially afford to double, if not triple those. We all know how I feel about my Oakland Athletics that I have a problem with, but there's been a lot of talk and whispers, and we've touched on this with you, Rob, about some sort of salary cap will never happen in baseball, but some sort of salary floor, which I am so in favor of. Is that something that you're hearing is being discussed at length?
Yeah, I mean, you asked earlier what one of the key issues would be, and that would be it. I think that players, if not a salary cap, if not a salary floor, do something, put something in there to avoid teams from not only tanking, but like essentially putting minor league rosters out there. Deliberately keeping your good players in the minors and not supplementing what you do have with free agents, and having such a poor low payroll that you're putting out an inferior product. There's too many teams in baseball. I mean, at least a third of the league each year that is, if not tanking, is admitting before going into the season and again at the trade deadline that they have no chance of being in the playoffs, and they seem to be content with that for 3 or 4 years or 5 years, whatever it takes to develop your own players, your own draftees, and move them along through the system, and then load up. Well, that's fine in one sense, and but then playing in front of empty stadiums, but being content with the revenue sharing or the TV money that you're getting, it's just so unjust and so inconsistent throughout baseball that you can really see the union's point in that area, because the money, it's almost like I found myself thinking this today, that it's almost like some of these players and agents were duped over the last couple of weeks, when baseball's handing out all this money again, it's to the upper tier, as we discussed, to the rich of the union getting richer, and then going to the negotiation table after the lockout and saying, and crying poor. You can't do it. You know, you just cashed in for $1.4 billion at free agent contracts over the last 2 weeks. So it's almost like, I mean, I don't think they were duped. There's no way that was the case. I mean, there was a reason for getting the business done when they could. But I mean, it's very difficult now for the union to sell the argument of, well, you know, come on, man, pay us the money. Well, we just paid you the money. It's how that money is distributed that's the issue.
I absolutely agree, and I mean the fans aren't stupid, and I really feel like from a fan's perspective and a paying customer, I'm buying the merch, I'm paying for the streaming package. MLB TV just had its best ever year in terms of streaming viewership, and now we're looking at this. I'm insulted personally, and I was even more insulted by the disingenuous load of horse crap that Rob Manfred paraded out the other day in that stupid letter to fans. I thought that was embarrassing. Clarkey, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is why I asked Rob about what else besides money is on the table here, because I hate talking about it. I really do. And at the end of the day, like,
of course we do.
I always wish that, and it's never going to happen. And I'm not naive enough to think that it will. But if the fans had a voice at the table and said, this is what we would like as fans to see in a game, like, they're going way too long. All the freaking meetings between catchers and pitchers, the media people want to leave on time and get their stories done. Right, Rob? So length of games has to be something that they discuss at the end of the day, I would hope.
I think I've told you guys this anecdote in the past. The one thing this is 5 years now in baseball for me. I covered the Leafs for 9 years before that. And it still infuriates me when I watch a Leaf game right now and it's over at 9:20 or 9:25 or 9:30. And I'm like,
exactly.
If I was at the Rogers Center, there's a good chance that this baby's only in the 6th inning and a slight chance it may only be in the 5th inning.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Every one of those, there were more playoff games this year that went 4+ hours than went 3 and change. And I think there were only 2 during the whole entire postseason that were less than 3 hours. And in this day and age, when your fan base is aging as it is, you got to do something about that, man. You know, it's just
right.
I don't know if it's the analytics world, if it's all these meetings, if it's the whole long at bats because of the swing and miss thing. But something has to be done to speed this up. It's just ridiculous.
I agree. And like in my past life, I used to produce the show after the post game show, right? And like we would be there till 1 a.m. Can you see McCowan like trying to stay down there for that long? Like, ridiculous. Not going to happen. But I hope they do something. They have to do something. Like, the game hasn't. Well, it has changed because guys are swinging and missing and trying to hit home runs and not seeing. Like, it just drives me crazy when I watch baseball now and like not one infielder on the left side of the diamond. The guy won't lay a bunt down to get a hit. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. I mean, why won't they do that? And you talk about one of the things that you hear thrown out there is banning the shift, but I don't even think that could happen, because then like all of a sudden it's favoring one group of players, hitters, I guess, and being unfavorable to pitchers because the stats would change if you banned the shift, right? Hitters would perform better, pitchers would perform worse.
Yeah. The only way to change the shift is to start doing stuff that is against the shift. But guys want to hit home runs and line drives and not bunt the ball.
Yeah, sure. And maybe something that would improve that and improve the length of games is more teams spending money on players that can actually make an impact instead of, having these BS payrolls. I'm looking now at the 2021 26-man roster payrolls here. So this does not include injured reserve money retained, anything like that. I've heard a number tossed around at maybe installing something like an $85 million salary floor. Well, that falls right in line with the 20th placed payroll Colorado Rockies from last year. And their payroll, of course, is going to plummet based on free agency. 85-58. You look at the 10 teams below them. Tampa Bay at 71, Kansas City 72, Oakland at 71. There's rumors that they want to slash to 40, which is a joke. A team that just missed the playoffs and is going to trade Matt Olson probably, which is going to make me sick. And then you look here, there are 4 teams under 50. This is baseball. Under 50. Seattle, Pittsburgh, and look at Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, 23 million. 23. Every single NHL team, including the Arizona Coyotes, is forced by the league to spend, what's the salary floor, Clarkey? 68.5. NHL teams.
Yeah.
Oh, it's embarrassing, Rob.
If you're in the negotiating room sitting at the right side of Tony Clark the next time they get together, and you give that exact same soliloquy that you just gave us, how could ownership not say, yeah, you're kind of right, we do need a floor?
Who can defend that to me? I don't know. And again,
impossible.
The people that do try and defend it are the ones that think that the fans are stupid. Well, hey, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not the dullest either, guys. Thanks, Manfred. Honestly, let's talk a little bit about free agency and the insanity we saw the last few days. And let's start with one of the most crazy things I've ever seen. And this is no disrespect to the man, because he's one of my favorite athletes, and I think he's an all-time great Hall of Fame pitcher. He might be a top 10 pitcher ever. Max Scherzer, $130 million from the Mets. He's going to make 44 million with an option after the second year to opt out from the Mets. He's 37. He'll be 38 when he throws his first pitch. I cannot believe it. Hey, Steve Cohen, he's got the money and spend it. This screams of desperation to me by the Mets. What are your thoughts on that contract?
Yeah, it's, you look around baseball, you've got the cheap owners who refuse to pay, and then you got the crazy ones like Steve Cohen. I mean, it's just, but it totally is desperation, right? I mean, ever since he bought the team, he's taken nothing but heat. He spent some money too, and he's basically had, you could argue a nucleus of a team that should be competitive, and the Mets were competitive for a while last year. But so now you knew he was losing Stroman, and he lost out on a couple other things. So it completely smacks of desperation, and it also smacks maybe a little bit of ego. It's like, I'm a billionaire, I've got this money, I could get whoever I want, so I'm getting Max Scherzer, and it's I'm gonna pay him what I feel like paying him. But I mean, it's just the common sense element of it. I realize it's not a long-term deal like so many of them are right now, but for all intents and purposes, it is when you add up the bottom line. And when do pitchers' arms start to go out? Usually before Max Scherzer is certainly an outlier in terms of the way that he's been able to perform for the duration of his career, and to get to this age and perform as well as he does. But one of these days, that arm, if it doesn't fall off, it's going to lose some of its effectiveness and some of its velocity. And if it's year 2 of getting almost 40 million, Steve Cohen's going to look somewhat ridiculous yet again.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the best team that never made the playoffs, the Toronto Blue Jays last year.
I thought you were going to talk about Seattle. Sorry.
No, sorry. Let's talk about the Blue Jays.
They're in there.
Robbie Ray's gone. Simeon's gone. I guess Garcia and Gossman are in the pitching staff. Do you think they're a better team now than they were?
Better than they were when? End of season, middle of season, or beginning of season? There's 3 elements of last season, right? I mean,
end of season.
Are they a better team than they were at the end of last season? No. My caveat to that would be they're not done yet. They are clearly going to get another infielder, or somebody you can play versatile, or be versatile enough to play different spots in the infield. I'm really of the opinion that it's at least a wash between Kevin Gausman and Robbie Ray.
I agree.
And I'm willing to go out on a limb and predict that perhaps Gausman will have a better season than Ray in 2022, if there is a season in 2022. And I'd really like to come back and evaluate that. It wasn't a trade, but the way it all worked out, evaluate those free agent signings 3 years from now. And I would not be surprised in the slightest if the Jays got the better of that deal. much was made about the Jays not going all out for Ray, and I think they saw some warning signs. I think we talked about this earlier last time we spoke, but his velocity had certainly dipped by the end of the season compared to what it had earlier in the year. 2-pitch guy. I know Gausman is pretty much a 2-pitch guy too, but do you really want to go to the wall in terms of a long-term deal with a guy like that? Who's the big thing that they were worried about, that people within the Jays organization told me off the record, was that max effort guy, as the lingo likes to describe it. Guys like that, man, once they get into their mid-30s, guys who throw hard like that, that's when arm troubles come along. So when you're forced to sign a guy like that into a long-term deal, you're sort of asking for trouble. I think the Jays were certainly in on Ray, and I think Ray and his camp, from what I was told, sort of tried to force the issue. And when they made an offer of, like, I think it was basically the same offer they made to Ray that they got Gausman for. Ray said, "Oh, no, we've got other guys that are interested. We need much more than that." And to his credit, Ross Atkins decided not to play chicken with him and made sure he got one of those 2 arms that he wanted, and went with Gausman. The Jays have been interested in Gausman the last 2 off seasons. There's something they see in him that they really like, and I think when you extend that, I think they believe that Pete Walker can make him an even better pitcher than he's been over the last 2 years, and a guy that can be a consistent guy in a rotation and give you upwards of 180 to 190 innings, which is so valuable now. I remember 200 innings from a starting pitcher was considered routine, but these days, if you get north of 180, you've got a valuable piece of your roster.
Well, and he's a guy that's going to come in and work with arguably the best pitching coach in the league. Look what he did with Robbie Ray. You're right, a 2-pitch guy. Gausman's got at least an extra bit of a weapon in his arsenal with the changeup, but I mean, his splitter. Like, you look at that pitch, and no one had a higher whiff rate on a pitch than he did with that splitter. That splitter is lethal. And I mean, when you mix it in, and he's got a pretty decent fastball, it's not overwhelming, but the thing about him is he locates it very well. He's got an extremely high strike zone throwing percentage, and you mix it in with the whiff rate on the way that splitter falls away from guys. And I think that Pete Walker's going to have another fun toy to kind of tool around with a little bit. And you look at the rest of the rotation, and they're obviously hoping that Manoah takes another step forward. I mean, he's got a greasy slider. It's one of the best in baseball already. Hoping obviously for a bounce back from Hyunjin Ryu as well. He started the year a little better, and he ended on a bit of a sour note, if you will. But I think that they do have some weapons here. But let's move on to talking about Marcus Semien. Obviously, he leaves a pretty significant hole, signs that big deal with the Rangers, $175 million. Don't know if that's going to look super great toward the end of that deal. The first 3 or 4 are probably going to be good. First of all, your impression of what's going on in Texas overall and their big splash of cash, and just how much losing Semien might affect the hitting lineup.
Yeah, I think for first point to the Rangers, I mean, obviously they're trying to buy their way into being a credible baseball team, which is the way, teams that don't develop players have to do it. And I do give the Jays a lot of credit, the Jays brain trust a lot of credit for going about it the opposite way. Developing a solid core on their own and then supplementing it with free agents, spending when it's time to supplement those guys. And that's basically what we've seen the last 2 off seasons. It's going to be interesting to see how they fill that production in the lineup. I mean, Semien was incredible last year, and I think, you might not replace his number. It'll be very difficult to replace his production, but I think the worry would be what it does. The bigger worry might be what it does to those around him. I mean, Vlad Guerrero Jr. got a lot of pitches because Marcus Semien was in the near the top of that order. Teoscar Hernandez, the same thing. Bo Bichette. So I mean, it was just such a murderer's row when all those 4 guys were performing, and we saw enough of them performing together. Springer in there as well, when for the brief spells that he was really on his game at the plate. And maybe George Springer's the answer to your question. Maybe a close to full season of George Springer makes up for what you lose production wise from Semien. And I'm sure that's part of what the Jays are hoping and expecting. And then they would hope that, that Vlad maybe builds on his season from last year, and that Bo Bichette continues to maybe add some consistency to his game. I worry as much defensively, though. I mean, Ross Atkins is on the record as saying that, he could see Kevin Biggio being an everyday guy at second base. And, I'm willing to cut Biggio some slack for having an off year last year. I mean, it was a bit growing pains, a bit injury, but I'm not convinced that he's your guy at second base and to be close to an everyday player. And, maybe last year or the year before would be the time to try that. You can get away with it when you're a team that's still building. You're not there yet. But now, I mean, this team is going to be as close to all in as you want to be for the next number of seasons. So do you want to risk a liability at second base, whether it's defensively or at the plate? Now, I think Biggio can be an adequate second baseman defensively. He won't be as good as Semyon was out there. But I mean, the jury is still out on him being a consistent enough performer at the plate. And I think we saw, in his rookie season, he had some success. He certainly was, he drew a lot of walks, and he was a very patient and very professional hitter, but pitchers adapted to that and figured out a way to pitch him. And, it'll be interesting to see what he does and how he rebounds from last year. And if he can sort of take it to the next level to be more than just a utility guy.
Yeah. Ryan, are you finished talking about baseball? You have another baseball question? Because I have one other question at the end here.
Well, the only other thing I wanted to ask Rob was there were rumors that they were, the Jays were sniffing around Chris Taylor, who of course has re-signed with the Dodgers. Not a shock there. Also rumors they were sniffing around Chris Bryant, a guy that they have been keen on for a couple years, and they certainly were sniffing around him at the trade deadline, of course, ultimately ending up in San Francisco. What are your opinions on potentially getting after a guy like that whenever this work stoppage, whatever you want to call it, labor dispute ends?
Yeah, I think that they're nowhere near being done, and I think that they're keen on anybody of value that they think that and including big names and big money. I mean, not Max Scherzer money necessarily, but they might have one more big money deal. I think they're really looking at trade options as well. I mean, I had a brief text exchange with Ross Atkins over the last 24 hours, and the thing that struck out with what he said to me was, "We're going to continue to get better," and basically that was his way of saying we're not done yet. And I think I've heard from some fans who are like, well, we haven't replaced Semyon yet, and who knows if Gosman's going to be good as Ray was. We've only got 4 starters. Well, first of all, about the starters, let's look at the rotation for the last 2 years. End of argument, right? This rotation is pretty good.
Oh yeah,
Nate Pearson might be that guy. He may be the fifth starter.
Yeah,
and they're not done yet. I think you're going to see at least another guy who can be a starting, probably a back of the rotation kind of guy that they'll acquire. They will try to get some more relief help and can continue to build what is becoming a pretty decent bullpen. And obviously they're going to need to get a position player in the infield. So from what I've heard, Atkins and crew are really looking at trade options as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of the final key pieces comes by that route rather than just free agency.
Moving and shaking at the Rogers Center. Clarkey, go ahead. I'm all done.
Rob, you covered the Leafs 9 years, correct?
Correct.
So I've been asking this question. Now, this might be the last time I ask it.
Yeah.
However, I have a question for you. I'm sure you fall and you're a Leaf fan, even though you might not admit it because you're in the media. But anyway, if the Leafs, I was going to say they're not going to miss the playoffs. Like, we're not going to have an 18-wheeler go off the road here. However, if they don't get out of the first round again, it is, in my opinion, that they need to change the core. And I think a possible way to change the core this coming off season would be to look at who has the number 1 pick overall. And if the Arizona Coyotes have that number 1 pick overall, my question is this: would you entertain trading Austin Matthews for the number 1 pick and freeing up $11 million?
Well, that would be a tough one. How many more years does Matthews have?
2 more years after this.
So that would factor into it.
Yes.
I think that the bigger factor would be, and I don't think really anybody is all that familiar with what the top of this year's draft class is going to be like. I mean, if there was another stud guy,
there's a big guy named Shane Wright, who's supposedly a
Yeah.
generational player.
He's not a generational player. That's not true.
I mean, Matthews might be.
Would you entertain it?
I would entertain it. I
Yes.
guess.
You would entertain it, Drury. I finally got a guy on my side.
No, but with caveats. I mean, I think.
For sure.
You probably would want more than just that number one pick, and
but
you
just
want to make sure.
You remember too, you're going to free up $10 million.
Right.
So you're going to add some pieces.
But here's why I'll change your mind back to my side, Rob. Fill that 11.6. Let's get it right. $11.634 million, and fill it with what?
Well, good question, right?
Replace
that out later.
What?
We'll figure that out later.
Well, you'll figure that out later.
Now, how about this though? Phil Kessel and Austin Matthews together, lighting it up for the Coyotes in downtown Tempe or wherever they're going to build their new arena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Scottsdale, I guess.
If they're not in Houston in a couple of years. Okay.
Well, I'm taking this one.
You
Ryan.
can have this one. So I'm up 2-1 in this debate. It's not dead yet. I will give you Rob because he at least said he'd entertain it.
He said he would entertain it. With caveats, which is fine, but it's not an absolute no.
He didn't say no.
Clarkey manipulated me on that.
Oh, okay. Well, so then I'm taking this back then.
No.
He manipulated.
Because it doesn't matter. I can manipulate all I want.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you one because anybody else we have on is going to outright disagree with me. Because
he's hard right now because they're on such a tear. It's hard. Yeah. But if they lose in the first round, there's going to be people out there looking for blood and we need to do something.
Great. There will have to be big changes if they lose in the first round. And
exactly. That's my point.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. It's just that when you're under the gun, and you're never going to be more under the gun in hockey than you will as someone running the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're going to be defined by your ability to not make rash decisions. And I would just like to say, the guy that's standing over my right shoulder here, I'm awful glad that George McPhee and those guys didn't give up on Ovechkin and ship him back to Russia like Damian Cox suggested one year. I would just like to say that thank you, George, and thank you to Brian McClellan for not giving up on that guy when everybody said you got to trade the Russian, he won't win you a cup. So
and
that's
if our guy walks away in 2 years.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Who would you give up on first, Matthews or Marner?
Well, here's the deal. I would too, but I don't think anyone would give up the number one pick for him. Well, that's my opinion. That's why I think it's Matthews and Phoenix. That's the only match you have to get the number one overall guy.
Here's another question. If you're Doug Armstrong, do you take Mitch Marner to China with you if there's a NHL playing in the Olympics, or do you just say, "Man, I saw what this guy did in the playoffs. I don't want him in one and out games."
I understand.
I think he's going.
You're going to be with the best of the best over there, and his ability to make plays. I'm sorry, I know people like to rag on him when he's not playing well, but his ability to make plays is in the upper echelon of probably 10 or 15 guys in the league that just can't do some.
And maybe he won't perform against the tougher teams, like the U.S. is always a tougher team, but like Finland and Sweden, he could excel against those.
Yeah. And that gets you to the final or the semifinal. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Well,
that was
an
fun.
Interesting debate. It's an interesting one. Yeah. It's always fun to have our friend Rob Longley from the Toronto Sun on to chat about the Blue Jays, and hey, a little bit of hockey as well. He's a well-rounded guy. He knows what he's doing.
He is.
Rob, we really appreciate this, brother. Thanks so much for doing this.
Anytime, guys. My pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
Happy it'll be fine. All right.
Here
we go, gentlemen. Let's do it. All right. Welcome back to Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. That's Clarkey. I'm Drury. We would like to share our appreciation once again for Toronto Mike and, of course, Rob Longley for joining the show this week. And now we're very pleased to be joined by our newest sponsor. It is Travis Stewart, who is a neurosport trainer for our friends over at See the Game. Travis, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing very well. Now, I know a lot of people are probably curious. What is See the Game? What is neurosport training? Walk us through a little bit of background information on the business and what you guys can do for athletes.
Yeah, for sure. So we're pretty new to this area. So a lot of people are not going to know who we are and especially what we do. It's very specialized type of training. So we're going to kind of go over the who, what, and where of what we do. And then in later parts, we're going to go a little bit more into depth with things. So as Drury said, we're See the Game Neurosport Training. We specialize in neurocognitive and visual training for athletes to take their game to the next level. And we're located in Listowel, Ontario, inside the Between the Lines Sports Campus. And then kind of for like more in-depth on the who, the types of athletes we're looking for and that we're working with are ones that are either at the high level or are striving to get there. So these athletes are looking to improve their neurocognition in order to unlock their potential and achieve new levels of performance. And it doesn't matter what age the athlete is or what sport they play. Every aspect of sport has vision and neurocognition involved. So there's a benefit to this type of training in every sport, whether it's like more traditional sports like hockey, baseball, basketball, non-traditional sports like race car driving. We just had a kid come in who was in the karting side of things, which was pretty interesting.
Wow.
And then esports too is pretty, like a lot of stuff we use is like very high tech. So it translates really easily to people who are in the esports world. And then we work with individual athletes, coaches to help them kind of add some of our training to their types of training. And then also teams in kind of like a group setting. And then, yeah, so for the what part of it, basically neurocognitive training is training up the brain and the eyes to improve skills like reaction time, decision-making, multiple object tracking, and a whole bunch more that I won't list off because it'll take too long. And then we also train visual skills like saccades, just like very quick, rapid eye movements, eye tracking, so just like following objects, and things like fixating on things.
Wow. I mean, we visited the facility. Clarkey and I have both been there, and I can say some of the stuff you guys have in there is pretty wild. The VR trainer, the goalie thing that we did. Now, Clarkey, you're a goalie, of course. That was pretty wild. I mean, for any goalies out there that want to get involved, it was pretty unbelievable. It was high-end stuff. So continue. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So like that stuff, we're going to go into a lot more of the tech, especially for the hockey side. We have some pretty cool stuff that we can kind of display in further episodes here. But yeah, so kind of what we're basing our like type of training on is a field called sports vision, and it's based on the premise of see, react, and move. So that's kind of just like basically the chain from the brain down to your muscles in your body to actually execute the decisions. So for the see part, vision is a lot more than 20/20 and just wearing glasses and stuff like that. So 20/20 means that you can just read a certain line on a black and white chart 20 feet away, stationary chart, that type of stuff. It's been the same for 150 years. So now take into consideration when doing sports, there's all these different variables. There's moving objects, objects on similarly colored backgrounds, colored objects. So we need a new way to assess vision that's not just 20/20. So we're using all these different pieces of technology and different drills and stuff to measure and train these different aspects of sport. For the react part, athletes need to make split-second decisions based on the visual information that they're getting. So if we're taking like a baseball example, it takes about 400 milliseconds for a baseball to cross the plate after being pitched at around 90 miles an hour. So to put that into perspective, just a blink one time is 300 milliseconds. So that does not leave, you blink one time when you're at the plate, you're pretty much done. So there's that aspect of the training too. But then to swing the bat from your shoulder across takes about 150 milliseconds. And then for the brain to actually send the signal, once you actually make that decision to swing, takes about 150 milliseconds to do that. So that leaves, 100 milliseconds for the batter to actually process the ball coming and to make that decision. So what we would want to work on is making that reaction time much quicker so that they actually can make those decisions, because obviously that's not a small margin or a very small margin of time to actually make that decision. And then finally for move, the purpose of vision is to direct our actions. So how you use your vision to make a visually guided motor response is critical in a sports setting.
So I want to bring our other sponsor into this, not to cross-contaminate, but your neighbor next door to you, the Listowel Squash Court's another sponsor of ours. I have been working my way up Jacob's ladder, and I was in second place And I started in 23rd, and I rolled off a bunch of nice victories. Anyway, tonight, and Ryan witnessed this.
I was there.
He was there. I played Jacob. This is a guy, Jacob, who's in first place, and he's
good.
He's good. I didn't win a game, but I got some points. Do you think if I went through it doesn't have to be hockey, but like it doesn't have to be the major sports, right? Like a squash player, because like I honestly wasn't seeing the ball after he hit it because he was hitting it so hard. But it could help me doing that too, right? Like playing squash.
Oh yeah. Like squash it's a really interesting sport. Like I've been playing it just like recreationally in school and stuff like that for a little bit. And it's interesting because the more you get into it and the longer it goes, the faster it gets and the less time you have to make those decisions.
Right.
So yeah, doing this type of stuff, like first of all, the movement part is really important, but then it's just this tiny little ball that's just flying across the court. So if you can make those decisions quicker, like the thing that I always struggles with when I'm playing is I hit it and then I wait and I wait too long for the ball to hit so I can like see where it goes. And by the time I actually find out where it goes, it's long gone before I can actually make it there to hit it back at the ball. So being able to like track the ball to where it is, make the decision as soon as it makes that bounce and place yourself in the right position to return the ball and to keep doing that without fatiguing throughout the thing, that's how you're going to succeed. So all of these different things are like really easily applicable to squash. It's a pretty interesting sport.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Clarkey tonight.
It did.
I want to, I just want to say as well, it's something I never even really considered until you mentioned it. When we were at the facility looking at all the great stuff you guys have over there at See the Game is the esports factor, because esports is exploding. We should get our friend Marissa Roberto back on here to talk about this. Because that was something I never even really considered. That's unbelievable.
Well, you're the esports guy. You barely get off the couch, so you'd be good at this probably.
That's so I take wild offense to that. I'm really good at NHL. Anyway, no, it's extremely cool stuff. And Travis, you're going to be back on with us over the next little while to dig even deeper into some of the stuff that you guys can offer athletes. See the Game. They're in Listowel at the Between the Lines campus. How can an athlete get in contact with you guys to potentially set up doing some of this great training, Travis?
For sure. Yeah. So we're pretty active on social media, mainly Instagram and Facebook, but yeah, mainly Instagram is where we're going to be checking things a lot more. So it's Instagram at c.the.game. And then you'll see kind of our contact info. There'll be a spot where you can send me an email. I'm kind of like the main contact person. And then we have it set up. You can see a lot of what we do. We've made some posts on just like some of the skills that we can work on with quick definition, just to kind of help people figure out what it was. But yeah, Instagram is the best way to get a hold of us. And then just coming to Between the Lines, like if anybody is in the area and wants to check us out, even if we're not here, we have our business cards up at the front, and the people at the front desk can kind of help you out with that. So
awesome, man. That's perfect. Well, we're interested and excited to dig even deeper into this stuff. See the Game. It's incredible. Like I said, we've been over there. It's a really cool facility with really cool tools over there. I think it would help just about any athlete, even someone like me and Clarkey. How about that? All right, Travis, we really appreciate this, my friend. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Back to wrap things up here on Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. We appreciate our guests this week. Of course, Toronto Mike of the Toronto Mic'd podcast, torontomike.com, and Hebsy on Sports. And we really appreciate our old friend Rob Longley jumping on here to chat with us, the Toronto Sun columnist for the Toronto Blue Jays, to chat about baseball and all the insanity going on in that league. And of course, Clarkey's weird Austin Matthews theory. We appreciate his take on that too. And as well as our friend Travis, the neurosport trainer from our new friends over at See the Game. Check them out online and on Instagram as well. Clarkey, final thoughts for the week here wrapping up. Now we've mentioned it before. I did come and witness your game against the aforementioned Jacob of Jacob's Ladder over at our friends at the Listowel Squash Courts, who this show is also brought to you by. I sat and watched you play with Alan. You got whipped up pretty good. You did okay in a couple of the games. But Jacob was too much at the top of the ladder for you.
Jacob's at the top of the ladder, and then the rest of us are down here. And I've had a fun journey up the ladder. I told you my goal
Well, you're
was
in second now.
top 3. I am in second now. And I think I've had some good luck along the way. I think the guy I played to get into second place just was off that day. But I was going into Jacob with a 6-0 streak and really 18-0, or no, it was 7-0 and 21-0. I hadn't lost a game, but it all came crashing to a halt against Jacob. He's good. There's no doubt about it. I'm like my goal now is to at least win a game against him, and then we'll see what happens. But he's good. There's no question about it. Maybe with some eye training from Travis, I can get there. I don't know.
You were pretty close. So I think you can certainly win a game. I think you think. Yeah.
I felt I was intimidated. I was nervous. There's no question about it. I was intimidated. And
was it my presence? Were you?
Well, there was an audience. There was a few people watching. 3 is a few, right? But no, it's just like when you play squash, you need to be in the right position and you need to make the right shot. And I felt, and I'll give him all the credit for me not being able to get into the positions I wanted to get in to make that right shot, because he was keeping me away from where I wanted to make the shots from. But at the end, hey, you know what? It was fun to play him. We played another 5 games after, and I still didn't beat him after that. But it was fun to play him, and I look forward to playing him again. And yeah, I'll keep you up to date. And you need to get on the court one day and try it out. It is a fun sport. It's a great sweat.
It looks fun.
It's a great sweat, and it's good.
Yeah, I'll get out on the court eventually here. I'm just busy being an OHL broadcaster and, among many other things on my plate. So
it's an exercise. It's some exercise, and it's a cheap sport to play, really. You need some running shoes and some shorts and a t-shirt and a racket. But Al's got some rackets you could use. So
yeah, I'll be borrowing rackets because I wasn't exactly enthused about some of the prices getting thrown around for the cost of these rackets.
Well, we were talking about high-end rackets. You could buy a racket for $49. Like, they're not that bad. So
I'll play a couple games, see if I like the sport, and then I'll consider investing in a racket. We'll
get
see.
Sabby out there, and the 3 of us will rotate and get you out there. Maybe Al too.
Yeah. No, that'll be fun. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun.
Did I mention I polished Al 3-0, the owner?
You did mention it, yeah, and I'm sure he's going to watch this back and go, "Oh, I maybe forgot about it." No, yeah, I knew you were going to mention.
But no, it's fun, and I encourage people to get out there. We're having a great men's league. It's the first one he's running, and it's going well.
It is.
I'm in second.
You're in second place. Our friends at Listowel Squash Courts. You can check them out on Facebook. They've got their website link right there. It's very easy to become a member. Sign up. It's 24/7. They give you a fob. You can book the courts literally any time and go in. You can play at 4 a.m. if you want. It's an amazing facility.
One last thing. Jacob's 29 years younger than me. Okay. 29 years younger. That's all I want to say.
This sounds a lot like an excuse. Like
He's
when
29 years younger, Drury. 29 years on me.
This sounds like
he played on the racquetball team for like Team Ontario. Like, he's good.
He's very good. You kind of sound like the team that like lost to a team that was missing its star player or something. You're like, oh well, they were younger than us. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good for you.
It was really fun. Good show.
It was fun. It was fun to watch. I want to ask you one last quick thing. Your Maple Leafs are
hotter than a pistol.
Are they dragging you back into full scale belief?
Oh, I'm full scale. Oh yeah, I'm full scale. Oh yeah. I've been thinking about how I'm gonna put the cup around my tattoo. Like, I got to figure that out.
Yeah.
Like how we're gonna fix the cup in there, because that's the only step that has to be determined.
Well, I got to add one. I got to add one to mine. A legitimate cup championship tattoo. So I got to figure that out as well. We can do it together.
Yes, we could. We could.
Go
but no,
you
know what? That game against Colorado, like, that was men against boys. Like, it was. Like,
Colorado looked horrific.
They did look horrific, and like, their goaltending sucked. But that doesn't matter. Like, when Austin Matthews is left wide open in front of the net for 5 seconds and can like stick handle 6 times before he scores, it's like, what is going on? Where's Cale Makar? Where's the great defenseman? And like, I don't know. It was just it. And then Pierre Engvall whipped one by the goalie like he was Alex Ovechkin. Like, easy. I don't know what's going on here, but 8 goals, 8-3. The Leafs, I mean, yes, they have played a few more games than other teams, but they sit number 1 in the standings right now when it comes to points. We'll take it.
They're rolling right now. It's very impressive. Jack Campbell's impressive. That Matthews goal, the hat trick against Colorado, in particular, that goal where he's standing on the foot of the crease and no one bothered him, and he made that nifty move. That was nasty. He seems to be getting himself back into Austin Matthews territory. So definitely interesting to follow. All right. We appreciate our guests for joining us this week. We appreciate our sponsors. We're, of course, as always, brought to you by CoolBet, the Listowel Squash Courts, and now our friends over at See the Game. We are on all the best podcast apps. We're on social media. Follow us at Instigating Pod, and we might have some more exciting news in terms of where you can potentially find this show in the very near future coming up. So stay tuned for that. We're on YouTube as well, where you can watch the full episodes. That is Clarkey. I am Drury. This is Instigating with the two of us, Clarkey and Drury. We'll chat next week.